A otro nivel con Juan Carlos Esquivel, un programa de participación ciudadana con interés en la comunidad, moderado por el empresario Juan Carlos Esquivel. A otro nivel con Juan Carlos Esquivel. Entrevistas, información local y temas trending en el sur de la Florida forman parte de la temática de este espacio comunitario. Cada mañana a las 9 por Radio Mundo 1210 AM y Doral Voice Radio. Un programa a otro nivel.
My dear friends, we are back here on another level with Juan Carlos Esquivel through Radio Mundo 1210 AM and all Doral Voice digital platforms. This segment, like every Thursday, I am joined by the excellent Luis Gonzalez del Castillo from the Francisco de Miranda Department, a historian, a guy who knows what he is talking about in any case. Welcome. Thank you, Brother Juan Carlos Esquivel, another level and well, to Doral Boys and that fundamental alliance that must be maintained. We must maintain the unity and, Radio Mundo and Doral Boys make a great radio couple, a team.
To reach with much more than just, the issue of the show and that, but to go to another level.
To another level, and that's why I bring you today. You know, we're being attacked from all sides as an open signal, and until December 31st we have the open signal with 1210. We're looking for other alternatives because obviously we are a station, both Radio Mundo and the alliance with Doral Boys. We say things as they should be said, without mincing words and the truth. And the truth is, sometimes it hurts the leftists. When it hurts them, they obviously put pressure on us and have tried to take us off the air. How did they take Radio Mombi and all those stations off the air in South Florida that were saying things that were very different from what they think? Okay. Well, we have to fight for freedom as the great concept that the Supreme Author, God the Father everywhere, as I say, our God who is everywhere, gives us. That's right. Look, today you're bringing an interesting book. I'm bringing this book. And why am I bringing this book? It's an inspiration. Okay, I was listening to you and you were talking about how the leader of Venezuela came out and is now a world leader. Yes, sir. Obviously, the case of Venezuela has been made known, but there are cases in many countries where evil has taken over and kidnapped the nation, and we need these nations to be freed. In the American case, we have Cuba and Nicaragua, which, along with Venezuela, are causing too much pain, too much crying, too much. So, when you were telling me about Maria Corina's escape,
Mission Impossible style, it was nothing
more than a tactical move, and that must be understood within the strategy that is being carried out like a Swiss watch, since they were there in those Nordic areas. Well, Switzerland is more in the center, but I mean in that Europe that is so important. Maria Corina shows once again what the Venezuelan family is made of. And I wanted to bring this Bible, which, as you can see, I haven't read much, right? Well, these are my father's remarks.
Yes, how great.
And it's the family, it's the Venezuelan family. I want to send a big hug, a deep and big hug from here, from Doral Boys and Radio Mundo, to all the Venezuelan families who have their children, grandchildren, prisoners, ladies, gentlemen, women, abused, children, boys of 12, 14 and 15 years old who have been beaten, and right now there are boys of 12 and 17 years old imprisoned to our officers who showed that the legacy of the liberating army is truly in their hearts. To Juan Carlos. What is he called? Caguaripano. Look how nice. Caguaripano Scott. Imagine, that last name, right, Juan Carlos? Caguaripano Scott. And so on, the memory of Oscar Perez, Captain Rafael Ramon Acosta Arevalo. There are so many fighters, and that's where the example is.
Well, this recent general who was left to die in prison, impressive. Let me tell you that yesterday, apart from the people of Venezuela feeling honored to have received the Nobel Peace Prize, a COA, a national COA, but not just a national CO, but a lady who should be nicknamed the Iron Lady too. And not because she is younger or older than the first one, simply because times are different. Margaret Thatcher and Maria Corina Machado's were two women. Well, Margaret was, but Maria Corina Machado has been a woman who can truly stand up to anyone. We are very, very concerned because she is very popular. Many people embrace her, want to see her, want to touch her, and there is a lot of evil out there. You have to take care of yourself, Maria Corina. Yesterday, December 10th.
Yesterday she jumped the barrier. It was an impressive hug. Well, that is very true. It is impressive how much she wanted to embrace people who are our nation, our people, but who are also the universal people of struggle. Why did I bring this Bible? Because we have to understand once and for all that this is a fight between the family against crime, against the am. It's the family. It's a fight between good and evil. It's a deeply spiritual fight. So that hug that goes to the Machado Perisca family, that goes to the Sosa Machado family, where that girl, Ana Karina, was. What a thing, what an impressive thing that a very young woman, 30 and something years old, just starting out, that experience is now known worldwide and impressed the kings. The king stayed, the comments make it.
Very nice. She speaks very nicely.
How incredible how instead of reading her mother's speech, she poured it out from the soul and said it. That's right. And this shows that love is indestructible, that those who left, I was saying on one of these occasions that I write, well, if we could ask the God of the universe like Lazarus to rise for a minute, all those who fell. To hug them and tell them that their sacrifice had not been in vain. That's right. And that escape of Maria Corina leads us to an inspiration that those energies of all those who are not here, those who will not return from a physical point of view because you cannot physically hug them. I want to express this metaphor of this spiritual hug that I am giving to Maria Corina Machado, that I am giving to her family, Mrs. Corina, to everyone, to that beautiful girl who spoke yesterday, and that those hugs that we will not tire of hugging are simply and plainly the ratification of a hug that we sent to President Donald J. Trump and his family, to all Americans. Because the Venezuelans who are here in the immense and overwhelming majority are good people. That's right. And I want to ask you, in this atmosphere of family and love, that all members of Congress, all the people who lead this great nation, make a great effort to help the president have an immigration policy that, once and for all, as he is doing in the field of combating something fundamental, which is to cleanse the American family of so many invasions of narcotics and mafias. Likewise, we are ready to help and we all make mistakes in life, but for small things, etc., as any human being can do not take it as an excuse. To simply throw away people, but rather come together to clean up from Alaska. President Donald Trump was sent a message from South Florida yesterday, Tuesday, when a Democrat won the mayoralty of Miami. The immigration system obviously had to be reformed and the problem had to be addressed at its root, but it had to change a little because it has been very drastic. And I want to talk about stopping you with, Emilio Gonzalez. Yeah, and there's one thing. That's the democratic alternation, and that's the beauty of 250 years of this system, 2.5 centuries. In a humble way, many of us don't have the nationality to vote here, etc., but we support what we consider to be a movement or an offer. That's a colonel with an impeccable service record and who should be called to other government positions because he also competed, he also won, the abstention won. Very few people, that's the point we made in one of these sessions, that we have to encourage. People who are looking for solutions like the one I just talked about on the migration issue, in solutions for cities, which can be complex, but there are ways to address it with technology, with knowledge, with organization, that once and for all, we citizens take on the task of investigating who the people are who are applying and in this case, wishing the best of luck to Mrs. Higgins, the future. Well, I wanted to talk to you about yesterday specifically, which was December 10, 1896, when Alfred Nobel died in San Remo, Italy. One of his dreams, and he had said that despite amassing an enormous fortune, he wanted to leave his entire fortune to an institution called Nobel so that it would reward those who truly deserve an award. And yesterday, like everyone else, Maria Corina Machado was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize on December 10th. You've heard everywhere how the poor woman had to leave masked, disguised as if she were James Bond, and finally boarded a helicopter, a canoe, a wooden boat near the coast of the state of Falcon in Venezuela to get to Curaçao, which is a dependent island despite its proximity to Venezuela, Aruba, Curaçao, Bonaire. And that's where they told her, rest easy, because what you've come from where you were clandestinely to get here, you've crossed Niagara Falls on foot. Well, it turns out that yesterday she also crossed Niagara Falls on a bicycle, right? But on foot and barefoot. December 10th also marks history, and you must know this very well, that it is one of the enduring dates. For example, in 1920, December 10th in Venezuela was commemorated for many decades as Venezuelan Military Aviation Day, formerly called the Venezuelan Air Force. The choice of this date is due to a compelling historical fact. On December 10, 1920, the aviation school, the cradle of Venezuelan aviation, was officially created. It trained pilots and the country's first military pilots, and it was here that the structure that would eventually become one of the most respected institutions in Venezuela, the Venezuelan Air Force, was born. Well, let's continue as is our tradition. By the way, for me, it's 1920, of course, because my father was born that year and that's when one begins to write history from one's family backwards and forwards. The rearview mirror, when you talk to me about this, obviously we're in 1920, during the Gomez era.
Exactly, I
mean, he's in the middle of it. He died in 1935, well into the 20th century. But it's obviously that development of aeronautics, and Venezuela began with that designation of December 10th. These people changed it to the day of the coup.
Exactly, it's a thing.
In the year 2009, the day of the betrayal of the Sabaneta phenomenon, Hugo Chavez Fria decided to change this celebration traditionally from December 10th to November 27th. I'll take that. A date that represents the origin of aviation, if not the episode. Do you remember the coup of February 27th, 1992? The coup where February 4th and November 27th. There were two coups. Exactly. Well, imagine where military force was used. Also, what do you have there? The tongue. This is from this Holy Bible in what is called Proverbs. Proverbs, yes, very important. The wicked is entangled in sins of the tongue, but the righteous are freed from them. A man is satisfied with the fruits of his mouth, and as he does, so shall he be done. To a fool his way seems right. A wise man heeds the advice of the wise. It is human nature to err.
Right?
And wise men rectify. I serve this program that is made from South Florida, from Doral, in conjunction with Doral Boys and Radio Mundo 1210 to send a message to those who in one way or another felt intimidated, etc., because they have their family over there in Venezuela and they have military relatives, etc. I have spoken a lot with officers during my life and I know how tormenting they are to be, let's say, somehow contained in their word, because they have relatives over there before an absolute, that is, something absurd, completely, only the insane can explain it, that they take, relatives and torture them and persecute them, that is, a cowardice. Of this magnitude,
How do you explain it? In the 21st century, when everyone talks about the 21st century and communism, the 21st century, socialism with. How do you explain that in a country, with so many laws and so many nations that have put human rights first? Imagine you talking about human rights, Delcy Rodriguez, talking about human rights and the New York Times speaking moderately.
this is something that, they will believe themselves. But I can't, because this is the country, well, it can only be explained by the fact that we definitely make a great citizen effort to demand that the New York Times apologize to the Venezuelan nation, to the Cuban nation, to the Nicaraguan nation. How is that possible? That is freedom of expression. That is why I brought this up. This is a spiritual struggle, and just like the language, the ink, the people who write. I wrote about that yesterday. If the Lord gave us the opportunity, I read your articles, you can see them in the Nacional, right?
The national newspaper every Saturday.
But yesterday I wrote an article, well, the day before yesterday I wrote a special article. Sometimes I apologize if there are some little details, they help me a lot in the newspaper. I appreciate it because I write from the heart and it just comes out. And yesterday I was talking about hugs. What happened? The power went out. We don't have a microphone. Yes, you can hear it. Well, if that's the case, well, keep talking, there's no problem. But what we may not have here at Exacto, no problem. But the interesting thing is that the hug I'm talking about is spiritually embracing the cause of justice. I'm asking the New York Times, and I say this as a man who has been writing freely for a newspaper for 30 years in the Nacional.
Okay?
From Venezuela, which would be like one of the most important newspapers in the United States, the New York Times, right? Well, the Venezuelan one is the national one that wasn't sold. That's very important. Many newspapers were bought. Well, many were, as we call it, taken from the property, like they did in the 60s. Confiscated, yes. They say that there is something called the law, let's say, for what you have to do with public utility, and then you say, well, a legal expropriation is necessary. To expropriate is to steal. Maria Corina was telling me, she is still the same girl she was.
When she was a little girl.
Right? She is still a girl in her spiritually beautiful Maricoriness that look what happens with this. The word, the language, what we have here has to be refined to always express itself with that function of doing good. And what you say through this station, what we write and what we do, which with the example, remains. And the transcendence of an entire nation has to be respected. This is a nation in struggle and we have respected those who do not think like us. The thing is, the opposite is true. Within the framework of that struggle, we sought dialogue on thousands of occasions. I even say it as a secret. People who one saw as close to Chavismo, to sit down and talk to, people one knows because, well, they claim to be intellectuals. I have an opinion about that, and I dare to deliberately state my point of view. Those who were Chavistas and then stopped being Chavistas, it was a punishment vote for what was not right in previous republics. For example, in governments that stole 10%, let's say if there's a joke going around, they stole 10%. But they thought they were going to be different, and unfortunately it wasn't like that because these people, apart from stealing 100%. Okay. Because in the cargo transportation business I can witness thousands Thousands of deals where they've tried to commit fraud through all these things that happened with OTAC, with Khadibi and all these people who embezzled the Venezuelan nation. And what happens? Everyone has an opportunity to reflect. What they should do is like Joseph. Since you brought the Bible talks about a character like Joseph. Well, Joseph was seized by the Pharaoh, okay? Because his brothers had sold him. Let's see, get into that. That story in the Bible is very powerful. He forgave them. But he didn't let them into the palace. I mean, that's where the key lies. We can forgive everyone, but these people can't manage the nation again. For example, there's a guy like Julio Borges, okay? Who hadn't been heard from in 3 years, and now he's talking and making statements that he belongs to Maria Corina's team. With all due respect, everyone has done their bit, but just as the establishment has to change in the United States and let the new youth or new ideas enter into government matters, we must do the same in Venezuela to rebuild a country like Venezuela, which will be pretty fast, despite what people say, because Venezuela has all the resources in the world. Yes, look, I would put my seat in this stage. Forgive me, Luis. No. I am very accurate, I understand. And you are specifically referring to a leader, but I am going to ask for the following. Right? To several. But I only mentioned one. Yes, but I want to focus on the following, and that is very important. Thank you for. It is very important that in this next stage we focus on building. Institutionality, on the rules of the game that we must start by complying with ourselves and enforcing them, which is what you just pointed out. I am going to skip Julio's name. I am going to go into depth, which is the following. Those who have made mistakes, errors in political leadership, those who have been in another place, must have the courage to stay safe in the sense that the people are asking for profound change and are inspired by a great leader who is much more than just a president, a question, right? She is representing not only Venezuela. That's why I embrace the people of Cuba, that's why I embrace the people of Nicaragua and all of America and President Donald J. Trump. This is the moment that I want to see President Trump embrace Maria Corina Machado. I want to see her in the White House. Why? Because this is not a national issue, it's not just an issue for Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. How is it possible that the New York Times would lend itself to using the written word?
Yes.
To simply and plainly normalize the behavior of a person who is involved in a genocide like Dels Elohina Rodriguez. And the psychiatrist who went into dementia and is now an accomplice to narco-terrorism, and you allow yourself to do that. So, I'm not campaigning with the New York Times. I'm demanding that they take responsibility or that they give us an opportunity to have what is called the right to reply. I ask them for this with humility. I am a Venezuelan citizen, but I have loved, I have had relationships in this country, I almost got married in this country, these are personal stories, but I have been to several universities in this country, to Harvard, I was in Chicago, and I tell the New York Times, gentlemen of the New York Times, correct your mistake. The written word or the spoken word commits us for life. Dear friend, we have no more time and we have to hand over the booth now. Kendall, I thank you for being with us. No, it's okay, relax, everything is valid, and especially when the words come from the soul. Gentlemen, I am Juan Carlos Esquivel, and I am joined by Luis Gonzalez del Castillo as every Thursday. This is On Another Level with Juan Carlos Esquivel, and it is on Radio Mundo 1210. Continue with our programming Noticias con Poder. Right now it starts. Live Otro NIvel. I love my